oh my God, this Google Ads stuff really, really works. This is great. More businesses need to know about that.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. My guest today is Mike Rhodes, the CEO and founder of Web Savvy and Agency Savvy, and co-author of the world's best-selling book on Google Ads, now in its 6th edition.
Just about. Sorry.
No problem. This is your book. The Ultimate Guide to Google Ads. His award-winning digital marketing agency, Web Savvy, is based in Melbourne, Australia. And since 2006, Mike and his team have been running campaigns for brands around the globe and is now one of Australia's largest independent Google agencies. Mike's passion for the future of AI and machine learning, which we're definitely going to dive into on this podcast, has seen him been invited to and speak at over 100 events around the world. A teacher at heart, he also runs Agency Savvy, training hundreds of agency owners on digital marketing and how to scale their business. An absolute pleasure to have my friend, Mike Rhodes. Welcome.
Right. Thank you for inviting me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you for waking up early. You're on the other side of the world. I always forgot. Thanks for getting up early and doing this podcast.
Not a problem. I am in the future.
We'll make sure we keep you awake and on your feet. Let's jump into it a little bit. Let's get a little bit of background on your entrepreneurial journey and how you become the Google Ads guy.
Ooh, nice. And sorry for interrupting you. I said almost because they are trying to find a printing press at the moment. Entrepreneur Press are publishing the book, and the manuscript's all done. It's all been proofed. They're just trying to find a printer. As you can imagine, in New York, there's a little bit of a backlog at the moment. So we're hoping for a November publication date. Fingers crossed.
Look, all that matters is there's a 6th edition that exists somewhere. It's just not printed anywhere
yet.
Right.
That's right. I have the cover. That's all that matters. And it should be here on a nice Zoom background behind me, but it's not because I'm not that fancy a marketer. Where did it start? Well, I was born in England, which is true. My dad did the corporate thing, and I hated him for it. As a teenager, he would leave before we got up in the morning at, when it was dark and raining outside like it is now here in Melbourne. And he would come back as we were going to bed, and I hated him for it. I totally understand now as a parent why he did what he did. But I decided as a 9-year-old, I ain't going to do this. I'm never going to commute. I'm not going to go work for the man. I'm not going to work in a cubicle because it doesn't make any sense to me. And I always knew that I would end up having my own business. I just didn't have a clue what it would be doing. I used to work in helicopters. So from being 6 years old on, I always wanted to fly helicopters, which I ended up doing as a 20-year-old, bizarrely, in Hawaii, which is a whole different set of stories, but we can go there if you want. But I ended up learning to fly in Hawaii and flying around the islands, going to Kauai.
Like giving the tours to the people?
No, learning. So the guy that taught me was Swiss, and he had just arrived in Oahu. And so the helicopter company that I was working for, they said, well, look, if you can persuade him to teach you for free, we'll give you the helicopter for maintenance and gas, because I was working in the helicopter company. I was basically computerizing the helicopter company. This is like in the early 90s. So I went, shit, cool. Okay, I'll go talk to him. Jan was his name. And I said, look, instead of flying around the car park doing squares, which is what you normally do when you're learning, I said, if we spend half the time going out to the outer islands, will you do it for free? Because you've just got here, you haven't seen the islands. And he said, sure, let's do that. So I wasn't flying at this point, but some of my learning was like belting down these canyons on Molokai and Kauai, these huge, like 3,000 foot canyons, 6 feet above the stream at the bottom, just boom, 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 flying down these canyons with this huge, it's amazing. It was a fun way to learn. And then I went back to the UK, finished uni, and ended up working for this really, really prestigious helicopter company in the UK. We had clients like the Queen and Bill Gates and Schumacher, and I wasn't flying. I need to be very clear. I was not sitting in the front seat at this point. I was doing flight ops, but just being around it, being able to walk down to the apron in the morning and smell the avgas, and I just loved it. But every single pilot there, to a man, they were all men, they were all ex-military, and they could not, to a man, wait to retire. They'd come out of the military, 10,000 hours under their belt, fantastic pilots, and they hated being a civilian pilot because it was so restrictive. And I sort of went, I don't want this to be my job for the next 40 years. Like everybody in this industry, you're in it because you love aviation. It pays for shit. I mean, my chief pilot was on 24 grand a year. English, but still, it's not a lot of money, even back in the 90s. So I went, I've experienced this. Now it's time for something else. I want to be like the guy in the back of the helicopter sipping champagne. And we had Kerry Packer and Mohammed El Fayed as clients. And, I'd watch these guys and go, that's pretty cool. I like this lifestyle of like swanning in, fly in by helicopter, pop over to Paris for the weekend in a helicopter, have a car waiting for you. This is all pretty cool.
It's a good life.
Good life, yeah. And I quite like champagne, so I'll do some of that. So I left England in 98. I went to New Zealand for 3 weeks. I stayed for 3 years, and I ended up in Sydney. I started my first business in New Zealand. That was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. So I'm finally answering your question 10 minutes later. But
great stories in the meantime, I promise.
Well, I set up an internet cafe in Queenstown in New Zealand, which is the ski town or the main ski town in New Zealand. Beautiful place, but it rains a lot. And it had been raining. I got the keys a week out from our opening date. We did the whole setup in 6 days, like the fastest business build you've ever seen. All my mates were in there helping me paint and build desks and fix computers. And we opened and we had a big party on the Saturday, I think it was. And then on Sunday, we gave it away for free all day. Monday, first day making money, profitable on day one. Tuesday, under 3 feet of water. The lake had come up. It had been raining this whole time, and the lake had come up and come up and come up. And I remember talking to my landlord the night before going, it looks a bit, and he goes, no, it never happens. Never happens. It always does that. Every few years it does that. It comes up and goes down. Well, this time it didn't go down. It kept coming up and up and up. And that next morning we were taking all the computers out. My mate lived across the road, and we're running across the road in the rain, putting all the computers into his house, and we were under 3 feet of water, and I had no insurance. And that was a good lesson in resilience, that one. But the water came down, we carried on, and I built that business up over 18 months and then sold it to a guy in town. It's a whole nother bizarre story about selling businesses. I sold it in 6 days, but I won't go there for the sake of time. And then sold that and moved to Sydney. Ended up doing some interesting stuff in Sydney, started another business with a mate there. And then I met Gab, who's fast asleep in the other room, and moved to Melbourne. So she's an Adelaide girl. I was in Sydney, and we both moved to Melbourne and met in the middle. And then I started the agency pretty much straight after that. 2007, I think I started the agency. So 13 years.
So how'd you get into Google Ads though?
Google Ads. So there was this infamous seminar back in 2004. And this amazing guy, Simon Chen, brought in all these incredible speakers. Like he had Armin Morin, Alex Bandosian, Paul Colligan, Jim, what's his name? The guy that sadly passed away, should know him. And Perry Marshall was there, 2004, talking about Google Ads, ripping into Yahoo Ads. That was quite funny. And I was just like, oh my God, this is what all of these small businesses that I've been talking to, because I was an eMyth consultant, an eMyth coach, just before that. So I'd been going out, meeting small businesses, saying, hey, I'm going to systemize your business, because this is what I did with my business. And then I discovered Gerber, and then I went and got trained with Gerber and his team and trained in, the eMyth way, paid him a shit ton of money to become an eMyth coach. And I'd walk into these businesses and go, I'm going to systemize your business. And they'd go, mate, I just need more leads. Yes. All right, I've got 7 folders here. That's folder number 5. We're going to get to that. Module 5 is, mate, I just want module 5. No, see, it's Gerber. It's a system. We start at 1, we go through up to 7. And there's actually, 8 through 21 that I can upsell you on later on if we get through all 7. When do we get to module 5? Is that like day 5, week 5? Well, yeah, usually around month 10. Get out of my office now was the usual response. I sucked at being an eMyth coach because I couldn't sell it, because all they wanted was, mate, if I just had a few more, covers in the restaurant, if I just had a few more patients, if I just had a few more clients, everything would be fine. The car wouldn't get repossessed. The dog wouldn't have left me, everything would be fine. But I couldn't sell it for shit. And then I saw this AdWords thing. I'm like, oh my God, what you mean? Only show ads to people that are looking for exactly what you sell? Oh, and only pay if and when they click that ad, and it's 5 cents a click. Bring that shit on. I can sell that. And I went back to my mastermind, Hair on Fire. I would tell everybody that I could about this amazing thing. I started teaching it. Not long after, I think 2005 was the first time I was on stage teaching it. And 2004, when I went back to my mastermind, one of the guys in my mastermind said, mate, I don't want you to consult. I'll give you half my business. Come and do that stuff inside the business, which turned out to be wonderful and terrible. It was a great learning experience. We set up a Google Ads account. You know, we spent a couple of $100 the first day, lost it all. And I was in the machine, tweak. In 3.5 weeks, we sold 100 grand's worth of stuff. And we got the cost per sale, which should never have been $150 because it was 5-cent clicks back then, but it started at $150 and we got it down to 20 in a case of about the first week and a half, and then cranked up the budgets and we sold Ugg boots into America. And I knew nothing about Ugg boots, but as soon as I started, cranking up the volume, he had to go find another supplier because he couldn't keep up. Turned out the other supplier was shit. The quality of the boots was terrible, and it turned into this 3.5 month long customer service nightmare, which all landed on me. So I was dealing with all these like angry Americans. You ruined my daughter's Christmas. You sold us crappy Ugg boots and all this sort of stuff, and having to refund, and people doing chargebacks. I didn't know what a chargeback was, but I found out quickly. And I think we scraped away from that with like $2,000 each to our name. 4 months later, it was my, part of my MBA in small business. And what I got out of it was, oh my God, this Google Ads stuff really, really works. This is great. More businesses need to know about that. So I, started teaching anybody that would listen. And for every 10 people that I would talk to, 9 would go, mate, I don't care how it bloody works. Just do it for me, would you? And so, I started doing it for people and swapping it for a case of beer here and helping friends out. And, I think I did some optimization. I swapped for an old secondhand mountain bike, which got me into mountain biking in Sydney. And and then wandered off, did some other stuff for a couple of years, and then started the agency 2007, a long circuitous route that made, like everything in life, right? If you take yourself back there and you look forward, there is no friggin' way that you could picture that. But if you stand here and look back, it's totally obvious how all the dots
all the dots connected easily looking backwards.
Totally. All those sliding door moments.
Yes. So here we are, 2020.
Yeah.
Right. We have so many options. We have Facebook ads, Google ads, Pinterest ads, Snap ads, wide array of media buying. Let's give you the question. First off, is Google ads for everyone? Who should be running Google ads? Who shouldn't be? Should everyone be running Google ads?
Easy answer. No, not everyone. If your customers are searching Google for the stuff that you sell, be that on the lead generation side, so you sell services, or on the physical product side, we should talk about that. If people are searching for that stuff, then yes, probably, definitely. But there are many, many other good options. And we've definitely seen people that, you go to something like traffic and conversion, the number of people in the room that are spending $100,000 a month on Facebook, but have never tried Google, astounds me. That really just, I don't get it. But, I guess a lot of people taught early on, get really, really good at one thing. Pick one and master it. Certainly that's, how Perry Marshall used to teach as well. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, because you don't want to half-ass 5 different things, because, they're going up against guys like you and us, right? And if you're going to come in half-baked and go, oh, I think I've done this right, it's a competitive auction. You're never going to win that auction against someone that knows what they're doing. But yes, it's not for everyone. And then beyond that, you've got guys like Tom Breeze that would say, hang on, Mike, you're missing a ton of stuff here. You haven't even talked about YouTube. And then there's the Google Display Network, which is how you can show ads on 2 million other sites that people are on all day, every day. But I think Facebook is, and I know very little about Facebook, frankly, but Facebook is probably easier to get a win. It's easier to get started. I went back and started doing some training yesterday. I haven't done any in-person training for quite a while, but we've had this charity contact us anyway. Long story. I ended up training 3 of their guys yesterday, and I've given them my course for free. Happy to give that to your listeners too. Given them my sort of basic course for free, just to get them, at least understanding what the interface is and what goes where, what a campaign is, an ad group and an ad. So it's like a 3-4 hour course. And I can just see their faces on the other end of the screen. They're like, yeah, we've gone through the whole course and we've set up this ad group. I'm like, yes, you have. Well done. You've got 4 keywords in there. Awesome. There's no ads. They're all broad match. You're going to get absolutely clobbered. And we spent the next hour just like putting some guardrails around them so that they don't melt a credit card. And I'm realizing through that paradox of knowledge just how confusing Google is when you've never been in there before. And we just take it for granted, right? We just boom, 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 yeah, flying around the interface, you just do these things. It's obvious. It's really obvious if you've been in there for 16 years through all the changes. But if you're logging in for the first time today, it is confusing as batshit, which is why Google have come up with this big smart button and then this nasty thing called expert mode. Oh, that sounds scary. Don't do expert mode. I'll do this smart thing. What do I do? Not much, really. Give us your domain, give us your credit card. We'll take care of the rest. What could go wrong? So yeah, Facebook, I think, is easier for your typical small business that wants to spend a few $100, that wants to get a few people in the door. Google is for the business that is committed to that growth. And you're either going to have to learn quite a lot, you're going to have to educate yourself, or you're going to have to get someone, like yourself in, or an agency in that can do all of that for you. At a minimum, the setup and, maybe the first few weeks of management just to knock off the rough edges, but trying to learn everything just to get set up right, you're going to be there for a little while. And then you're going to realize, oh, I didn't quite do that right. And you're going to pay a little bit of money to the market that's going to teach you fairly quickly that you didn't do that right. So it does require a commitment, either in time or the money invested to get it done right. And I think there are other platforms that are probably a lower investment, either in time or money, to get going at a reasonable rate and get a win. And I think that's why you have so many people that are spending a lot of money on Facebook. I also think, and I'm biased, but I think Facebook's a bit easier to teach. And so there are a lot of Facebook. You go to TNC, how many people are talking about Facebook? And there's like 3 of us that talk about Google out of 86 speakers.
No, I'm just curious. Going back to how you started, intent matters, right? So
yeah,
you have to understand what's the intent that you're advertising for. If you're a restaurant, I think you'll have a lot more success on Google than you will on Facebook, or a plumbing company, because no one's going on Facebook seeing an ad for a plumber and being like, oh man, my toilet's been leaking for 3 weeks.
Suddenly,
thank you. I've been looking for a plumber and you came to me. But on Google, people search for those type of things.
Absolutely. But also many people will go onto Facebook and ask their groups and their friends and that friendship group, hey, I need a plumber. Who do you use? Like we're about to move house, hopefully, if they allow removalists in a few weeks. And my wife, jumped on the local community group and went like, who's good? I haven't used a removalist in a long time. Who's good? Who's to be trusted? So you do often go there first, and then failing that, you might jump on Google and go, right, best removalist in my area.
And then how important is, let's say, even if you're not using Google Ads, to at least have your branded search?
Absolutely. So yeah, if people are searching for you by name, so that's what we mean by branded search, right? I don't know where to pitch this. I figure your audience knows an awful lot about this stuff, so I won't explain the 101 stuff. But if people are looking for you by name, you want to make sure you can be found. Because maybe they've been off in that Facebook group. They've been asking, and then, ABC removalist. Oh, okay. And then you jump on Google and search for ABC removalist. And the website is part of every buying process these days. It's in there somewhere, and at some point someone's going to go Google you to find your website to make sure you don't have 2 heads and you do look half decent, and I do feel comfortable booking you even though I've never heard of you. At that point, you want to make sure somebody can find you. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, why am I paying for an ad for my brand? We rank number 1 organically. Well, there are loads and loads of reasons why you should do that. Do you want to get into those?
Sure.
Okay. First off, it's a defensive measure because anybody can bid on your brand name. Anyone can plug that in as a keyword into the Google system and say, when somebody searches for that, I want my ad to show up. And if you're not showing an ad for your business name, and a few competitors are, particularly on a screen that big, then your site, even though you're number 1 organic, will be a couple of scrolls down. Just on a mobile can take up.
Just a perfect example. A while ago, I Googled Asana, like the project management system, and Monday.com. Monday was ahead of them. And I was like, this is a giant failure.
Yeah, and their headline is typically, if they're still running the same ad, they don't mention Asana in the ad because they're smart, right? Because that would be deceptive and misleading conduct to use somebody else's trademark in your ad. That's a big no-no. But they just have this great headline of Monday's better. Yep. Or something along those lines. They don't mention Asana, but yeah, and it's a big ad because they know what they're doing. So it's pimped out with all the extra bits that you can have in there. And on a mobile, that ad takes up the entire screen, and people are lazy and they'll just click the first thing that they see.
I reckon they must have taken a bunch. Look, they probably didn't take 90%, but they definitely took a percentage of people who were going to go with Asana and search for it and went with them instead.
And it would be so easy for Asana to fix that. If Asana just ran a brand ad, they'd probably be paying somewhere between 10 and 50 cents a click. And because Google would understand, oh, hang on, people are searching for Asana and you are Asana, and it goes to asana.com and your page is all about Asana, but this other crowd here, they're monday.com, and they've got this page that mentions Asana and how they think they're better, but you're way more relevant. Okay, I'm gonna put your ad right at the top. I'm gonna charge you less than I'm charging Monday, and I'm gonna put that Monday ad down to the bottom of the page. And if it doesn't get any clicks there, I'll push it to page 2, because Google is all about relevance. But the genius of the system is we'll let the crowd figure out what is relevant and what's not. And if you had those 2 ads at the top of the page, and maybe for a little while, they're both 1 and 2 at the top of the page, if you search for Asana, you're going to click the Asana ad. If they were both the same size and both next to each other, you're going to click the Asana ad. The machine watches all of that, learns from it, and goes, oh, people that search for that, they want this, they don't want that. Right, I'll get rid of that one. I'll put the Asana ad at the top of the page. And if they did that even for 6 months, they'd either cause Monday to lose all of those clicks, they'd cause Monday to pay way more for those clicks, to the point where maybe Monday give up. And in 6 months' time, maybe they can turn their brand ad off for a bit. Mm-hmm. You also have this perception of leadership. If you've got the top ad, so now back on desktop, you've got the ad at the top and you're the number 1 organic. And then you should have a whole bunch of other listings there too, like, your Facebook page and various other pages, Twitter maybe. There is a perception of leadership. You kind of know what you're doing. And yes, okay, some people are going to click your ad and maybe they didn't need to. Maybe they would have found you anyway and they would have clicked on organic and, oh, that's going to cost you money. Sorry, we're boo-hoo. We had a client that wanted to save money by getting rid of that brand ad. Now, they were spending a bit on Google and Facebook, so that ad was costing them $3,000 a week. So they decided to turn that brand ad off to save $3,000 a week. We ran all the numbers for them every single week. It took them about 8 weeks to believe us. It was costing them $150,000 a month in revenue, incremental revenue. So when we looked at, revenue from Google and organic, or ads and organic, versus now just organic, no more ads, it was costing $150,000 a month. So they eventually relented and okay, we'll turn those ads back on. Yeah. And it's a great place to get started. It's actually one of the things we talked about on my coaching call yesterday, of get started there. Start with a brand campaign. It's the easiest thing to do because it's the hardest thing to mess up. You know what the name of your business is. And if people are searching for you by name, then plug your name in there as well. If it's a very, very common name, then you can sort of modify that a little bit. You could say, I don't know, if web savvy was a term in popular usage, or we could say web savvy agency, web savvy Google ads, things like that. But make sure the brand name is in there. The cost is going to be really, really minor. And yes, maybe they could have found you anyway, but it's really, really minor. And because of that high relevance, Google says, oh, you're Asana. People are typing in Asana, they're saying an ad about Asana, the asana.com, and then they go to a site that's all about Asana. That's really, really high relevance. I'm going to give you mates rates because you're such a good advertiser. The quality of all of this is so high. I'm going to show your ad more often and I'm going to charge you less. It's this weird thing in Google called quality score. But the genius, again, of that whole system is we'll let the crowd decide. We'll let the crowd tell the machine by what they click on what's relevant and what's not. If you're really relevant, we'll charge you less. We'll show your ads more. The flip side of that coin, though, if you're now monday.com and people are searching for Asana and people are not clicking your ad compared to the other ads on the page, compared to your competitors, well, then I need to charge you more because you don't seem to be very relevant. I need to show your ad less. And I've seen people pay $25 a click in a market that should be $1 a click because what happens next is Google then suggests that you should be paying a little bit more, and it all comes up in red inside your account. You know, your bid is too low. You should be paying $3. And then people go, oh, okay, $3. And then it shows your ad for a little bit. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I just want to interrupt, because how do the listeners figure out how much they should be paying? Like, because you said, you just gave a perfect example. They're paying $25 when theoretically they should be paying, $1 or whatever it is. You have an agency, and I have an agency. I have the luxury of seeing what a combine looks like, and I could see across multiple accounts. But if you're just a business and you're trying to run it by yourself, how do you know whether you're paying a good amount for a click or not?
That's a really good question. And yes, experience is a huge part of that. You just know going into a new account, I should probably be around about here, because you've got experience either in that niche or in similar businesses. So there's a free tool inside the Google Ads account called Keyword Planner, and that will give you a bit of a guide. It'll say, like, most people are paying around about $2 a click for this, but if you want your ad to be at the very, very top of the page, then you might be thinking more like $8, and it'll give you that. So that's a pretty good starting point. You should also mix that with a dose of reality. So you should think about why are people clicking? And really, I think most businesses should start here. You know, what do we want people to do? And how's that aligned with what people searching for this thing, product, service, whatever, what do they want to do? Let's make sure we're giving them what they want to do. But what do we measure here? So let's say for that lead generation business, the plumber, say, or maybe as a plumber is a bad example, because that's an emergency sort of thing and people usually call, but most service businesses will have some gyms, sort of form
you have
on
gyms,
the page.
And you have other,
or a lawyer, or your blind plantation shutters, all right? And you have free home measure and quote, normally in normal times when people can actually go to other people's homes. But there's some sort of form that somebody is going to fill out. That's what you're going to measure. And that's what in Google terms is a conversion. Google Analytics will call it a goal, but it's the thing that we want people to do. And you're going to very quickly find out, okay, so when people search for plantation shutters, that we can get 1 in 10 of them to fill out the form on our website. And we know our numbers in our business. Like, every business owner knows their P&L inside out, I think, at this point. I think we've all, there are some that maybe only look at it once a year, but I think most people would look at it monthly. And they understand, okay, this is how much business I do. And they all have a number in mind of what I'm willing to pay to acquire a new customer. Most businesses undershoot that number. Most businesses want to get new customers for $10 and then go make $1,000 off that new customer, which is insane. And Google is a wonderful leveler. This might be a bit of a tangent, but they really made it possible for the little guy to compete with the big guy, because it wasn't about she with the biggest wallet wins. It was about who's the most relevant, who is giving the people searching Google what they want in this moment. And again, by wisdom of the crowds, which ads are getting all the clicks and which ones aren't. So Google then rewards the good advertiser, the one that is delivering what people want, which is great, because it means that us little agencies can compete with the WPPs of the world and probably do a better job too. Where the hell was I going with that? So you need to know your numbers. So if you know that 1 in 10 become a lead, and then let's say after that, you are wonderful at what you do and you manage to get in touch with them all and you sell 1 in 2 of those. Well, now I'm just making the numbers really, really easy because we don't have a whiteboard and I need to do easy in my head and it's 6 a.m. So now you know that 1 in 20 people became a customer, and let's keep the numbers really, really easy. That customer is worth $1,000 profit to you over the lifetime of that business. So great. What are you prepared to spend to get $1,000? That becomes the question. And that's where most businesses will pick a really, really low number. But if your competitors are willing to pay $200 to acquire that customer that's going to make them $1,000, and then you better be prepared to spend $200, because if you're only prepared to spend $50 to acquire that customer, you're going to lose because you're up against all these people willing to spend $200. And then it's math. You just work that back and go, well, okay, how many people do I need to get to my website to get somebody to fill in the form? I realized that was 1 in 10. And so you just work it out and go, okay, so the most I can afford to get somebody to my website is $5. So I can pay up to $5 a click. So maybe you try and start a little lower than that because maybe you don't want to dive in right at the maximum. And you say to Google, okay, let's see what you can do for $3 a click and let's see how it goes.
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say, you touched on two really important things here. I think one is the name of the game is the person willing to pay the most to acquire the customer wins. Like, yep. Unfortunately, you may not like it, but that's how the game's being played. And then number two is, I agree with you. I speak to, especially in the e-com world, a lot of businesses don't know their numbers. They arbitrarily pull out, some sort of return they need to make that's not founded in any repeat customer rate, lifetime value. No idea. And they think more is the better. And I try to explain to them, more is good, making more profit. But if you're making more on the back end, you could scale a lot more if you're willing to break even on your acquisition versus needing to make $4,000 on your acquisition.
Yes. Well, that's the key word in what you just said is profit. So most people look at that and go, the key thing is, when do you want to make that profit? Do you need to make it on the very first sale? No, if you're selling garage doors or coffins, then you probably need to make a decent bit of money on the first sale. Not a lot of repeat business there. We had a client selling vitamins, and they came in and they were on, and I'll vaguely remember these numbers, don't quote me, but when they came in, their ROAS was about 3.5. And ROAS isn't the best metric, but it's the one that we will typically default to because people don't know their numbers enough to talk about.
It's the chest puffing number. It's the how much can you bench press in weightlifting.
It is. It's better than CPA, and it's a hell of a lot better than CPC, or cost per click. Sorry, which some businesses and some agencies will still talk about impressions and clicks and cost per click. I mean, but ROAS is the chest puffing number. I love that. And they came in at like 3.5 and said, we need a ROAS of 7. I'm like, okay, that's eminently doable. And my team are amazing. And they got them to a ROAS of about 8 in 2 months. And then they said, oh, well, that was a bit too easy. Okay, now we need a ROAS of 13. And they didn't get it. No matter how I explained it, they just decided that this was the new target. And we eventually had to part ways because they just couldn't get it. And so I'll give the listener a visual for that. That is like saying, okay, that ROAS of 7, that's the whole archery target. All of the traffic that's there, it's that big. Now saying a ROAS of 13, that's like saying you can only hit the bullseye and we only count anything that hits the bullseye. Sure, it's more valuable when you hit the bullseye, but there's a lot less arrows that can fit on the bullseye and it's harder to hit. The name of the game is total profit, and it should be based on, like you said, lifetime value, or pick a range. Could be 12 months, could be 90-day, 180-day payback period, but you've got some period where you're saying, okay, yes, they're going to make repeat business. And Trevor, our head of Facebook and strategy, just did a wonderful presentation on this for a big group of retailers here in Australia. And looking at your numbers and Facebook analytics and Google analytics, the numbers are all in there if you know how to read them. Yes, we make $80 on that first sale revenue, but then over the next 90 days, there's actually another $50 comes in. Well, you've got to take all of that into account. Now, what are you willing to pay for that guy to come in on the first go? And like you say, the fastest way to grow is to do that at break even. Now, if you really know your numbers, you might even be willing to go negative on that first sale because you know you're going to make it up over time. In the supermarket game, that's a loss leader. You put your bananas at the front of the store and you put a really low price on them. People come in and buy bananas in the supermarket. I don't know why bananas, but and guys like Sam Walton at Walmart have been doing this for 50 years. We know how to visually merchandise. We know what to put where and make that bit super cheap because people come in and buy that and then they go spend $100 on everything else. What's the equivalent in your store, in your e-commerce store? What brings people in for cheap? And this is a dangerous one because it's potentially a race to the bottom. But if you are just a little bit cheaper than your competition, you think about Google shopping ads across the top of Google, you can see the price, you can see the description, you can see the picture. In some markets where there's quite uniform consistency around price, if everybody's $45 but you're 42, Google's going to put your ad top left and you're going to get way more clicks than the other people. I know very little about Amazon, but I did see some research recently on the difference that a cent can make on Amazon, where you're just that teeny bit cheaper than everybody else, you get a disproportionate number of clicks. Got to be careful with that. It can be a race to the bottom. You don't want to be chopping away at price. But if you know your numbers and you realize that that's a loss leader and it acquires new people for your business that then go on and buy other things, that can be a wonderful strategy.
Yeah, it's so funny. I listen to people talk about ROAS all the time and post those screenshots of a 14x. And the first thing that always crosses my mind is if I'm getting a client 14x, I'm doing something wrong because I should have been spending a lot more money.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of mistakes that we just went over, including not knowing your numbers. But when it comes to Google Ads, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see companies making?
Oh my goodness. This will be a controversial one, I think, in some circles, but trusting everything that Google say. They've done an amazing job. They've built this incredible machine, but they do some things, and I don't think they do it maliciously. I really don't. And there'll be people that argue with me there. I don't know how geeky to get on you, but like just recently, they've done a couple of things just in the past few weeks. They've started hiding more and more data from us, and then they've also levied this 2% tax for advertisers in the UK, and I think it's 5% in Turkey and Austria. I might have got that slightly wrong because I don't have any clients in Turkey. But the way they've done that is, that's a huge tangent, sorry, but like the way they've done that is quite sneaky. It doesn't show up in your account. It gets added onto the invoice. The only people that are ever going to see that are the people in accounting that pay the bills, and it doesn't factor into your cost. It's sneaky. And then hiding data because they were insignificant search queries. If they're that bloody insignificant, don't charge us for them. And you speak to the engineers at Google, and they, in normal times, I would go to San Francisco and go to the big event once a year because you get amazing access to the engineers and to the product managers. And you will ask them about something like smart shopping and say, why do you hide all of the search queries in smart shopping? We need to see those. And they honestly can't understand why you would want to see that. They look perplexed and go, but why? It's all machine learning. You can't do anything with them anyway. Yeah, but we use that information to improve other parts of our account and other parts of our business. We use that information to make sure that you are not marking your own homework and giving us a whole bunch of shitty traffic that we can't tell is shitty. I've never really thought about it like that before. So I've completely forgotten the question.
The biggest mistakes you see businesses making in Facebook ads. I guess we could make it super simple. Like when you audit an account, like are there things you see consistent mistakes?
So there'd be the super basic ones like showing your ad across multiple networks. So Google splits into two networks, search and display. Very, very different types of traffic, very, very different numbers. And if you lump all of that together, anything in aggregate is crap. That's a statistician's joke, isn't it? Like that all averages are crap. But the average of really good and really terrible is not a useful number. So mixing things together. I mean, this mob I was coaching yesterday, this charity, they had 4 keywords in there. They're all broad match, which gives Google huge leeway to go and show your ad to something vaguely related. So only using broad match keywords in your account is another mistake. Single word keywords are even worse. So, somebody that's searching for TV, the single word TV, could be searching for a ton of different reasons. There is no commercial intent behind that term. It's kids doing homework and somebody at the very, very early stages of buying a TV and other people looking for a completely different type of TV, a different meaning to that word. But the person searching for Sony BX1600W, they know exactly what they want. So those sorts of keywords with super high intent, start just with those and then grudgingly work your way up towards the other stuff. What else do people do wrong? God, there's so many things. On the copywriting side, I'm not a great copywriter by any stretch, but a lot of people will have virtually the same ad in every single ad group in their campaign. And then they never do any testing. And testing's definitely changing with machine learning, but do some testing, like not measuring. That's probably the biggest one. And you've already said it. A lot of businesses don't know their numbers, but you can measure so much. And yes, that's changing. And there's a big debate between guys like us on the internet at the moment. JB's part of that. John Belcher and a whole bunch of other people are part of that sort of discussion that's going on of how are we going to track when cookies don't exist anymore. Great time to be thinking about that now, because we probably still have cookies around for another year-ish, maybe 2. But that whole thing is changing because Apple want to be the anti-privacy guys and do a big FU to Facebook and Google, and that will change. But at least know your numbers, know what a new customer is worth, know what your lifetime value is, know what that 90-day payback period is. These are not hard things, not super hard things to figure out, and you won't get them right, but at least be, in the ballpark and be somewhat directional, and know what they are. But not setting up any kind of tracking is a huge mistake that I think people make. Not making changes, like not logging in. I saw a stat once. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was a huge portion of people running Google ads have not logged in over a year. Oh. And Google is just happily going to take that money until that credit card runs out. And why not? Someone's signed a terms and agreement somewhere that says, yes, we want to run ads and we want to spend $1,000 a month. And the fact that we're doing it like idiots, Google don't care.
There's an expression: if you're dumb enough to pay me, I'm smart enough to take your money. So,
okay, I didn't know that one, but I like it. Yeah, go on.
If you're a local business, what are 3 things that you should be doing right now to generate great results?
Get a brand campaign running. So if people are looking for you by name, sort that out. Get a remarketing campaign. I speak to a lot of B2B businesses that have never done Google ads because, there's 13 people a month are searching for what they do. They think they don't get a lot of traffic, but the traffic that they get is very valuable. You've been referred by somebody, you've heard about somebody through the industry. A remarketing ad, an ad that is going to follow somebody around the internet for a few days or maybe a few weeks after they've been to your website, to just gently remind them who you are and what all the benefits of doing business with you are, and having a few different ads to talk about those different benefits. Hugely powerful for a lot of businesses who tend to think that, somebody visited my website once. One, why don't they all convert? I don't understand. I've had clients say that to me. Why isn't it 100% conversion? They just typed in this thing that with really high intent. You've told me that was a high intent keyword, Mike. Why don't they all convert? Why is it only 20%? I'm like, 20% is good. It's okay. We gave away our course recently. So we gave people a link with a coupon code embedded that made the course completely free for them, people that understood what Google Ads was. And still, I was still amazed. I shouldn't be amazed at this point, but I was amazed to see that cart had a 35% abandon rate. People are landing on Thrivecart with the link filled in, price 0, and still a third of them at that point leave. Like, you cannot make it easier than that. No credit card required. Just pop your name and email address in and you're in, and still 35% leave. So you're never going to get 100% conversion rate. And I had a point for that, but I can't remember what it is. So I'll move on to another mistake. You said 3 things for local, right? So there's that. There's remarketing. Actually, I'll go outside of Google Ads for a minute and go back to your website. A lot of these, particularly B2B businesses that I've been talking to during the pandemic, doing a lot of Zoom webinars and so on, I find that a tiny number of them know who's in charge. Who's got the logins to your website? Where is it hosted? Who owns your domain name? What the hell is your DNS? Little things like that. Like, do you have any guardrails around your business at all? And when that one person in your business who knows that stuff leaves, or worse, it's still that external developer, that guy that built your website 3 years ago is the only person that knows all of that stuff. Oh, and they've gone out of business now and they're a plumber now. So you can't log into your website if you tried. That is a massive, massive problem. And I wish more businesses would take at least that seriously. I get that the data bit seems scary, like setting up Google Analytics. That's something my geek should have done. Tag Manager, sounds even scarier. But it's really, really important to get control of that stuff. You don't need to understand it.
What file number is that in eMyth Consulting? Is that file number 9? Know your passwords.
Yeah. That was module 22. I think.
That was the upsell. Know your password.
Yeah. That didn't exist back then.
You do a lot of competitive research, right? I'm sure for clients. Do you have any tools that you recommend the listeners use in order to get good, competitive analysis, I guess?
Gosh, I mean, you can really dive deep into that. And I actually don't do I don't do a ton anymore. I'm sure the team do a lot more. I'm going to be pretty off tools, but yeah, so I'd start with the keyword stuff, and then we can think about looking at what your competitors are doing. Now, I come from the old school of I don't worry too much about what competitors are doing, like focus more on yourself. But it is useful to understand the landscape from a strategic point of view. What are other people offering? Where are the gaps in that? So from a keyword point of view, you've got Keyword Planner inside Google Ads. That's good enough for 98% of cases. But then if you want a paid tool, and certainly when we get to ad copy, this becomes a bit more interesting. But a couple of paid tools that I would recommend: SEMrush, semrush.com, and SpyFu, SPYFU. iSpionage is another good one, but SEMrush and SpyFu, I don't know what they cost these days. I have no idea. But if you really want paid, they're good. SpyFu is particularly nice because you can see the historic ads of a competitor. So you can sort of see their testing process. So you can see, okay, 6 months ago they had an ad that said this, but they got rid of that, and now their ads say this. The assumption we're all making at that point is they know what they're doing, and they've changed that for a reason, that they know their numbers, and they've kept the new one for a good reason. But that may not be the case, but you can get some ideas from that. Never, ever, ever copy a competitor's ad word for word. One, it's just not ethically right, but also you don't understand why they've done what they've done in their business. But if you're looking at a range of competitors, it's great to use that as an idea generator. You're looking for ideas and go, we were going to go to market with read my white paper, but everybody in this market is giving away this for free and this for free and this for free and saying, jump on a free 30-minute strategy call. Maybe we want to rethink that, because if we're up against that, maybe the free white paper just nobody's going to care. We could maybe still test that, but I think we need a better offer.
It's funny. There aren't that the percentage of businesses that are truly successful, right? If you look at the percentage, what it takes, I mean, no one ever wants to become an entrepreneur when you look at those numbers, right? The odds are definitely against you, but the willing to just blindly follow your next entrepreneur, when we know that 90% of businesses fail, but we're going to look at them and copy what they're doing. We're all following each other off the cliff. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But you said something interesting, that you're not so much in it. So you're an agency owner right now. You have a team that helps run ads for your clients. How do you balance being the authority figure, yet you're not the person running the ads anymore? I feel like it's such an important question for business owners, because there's a lot of business leaders who always feel they need to hold on to every part of the business in order to maintain that credibility, in order to maintain that authority, but nearly impossible to even grow if you're going to do something like that. So what advice do you have for those listeners?
Oh my God. Confessions of a micromanager. With great difficulty and with an amazing team. My team deserve all the credit here. I think that business is this. Somebody asked me a similar question recently, and for me, it's this balancing.
But here's the thing, right? Like, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your team, my team, a lot of businesses teams, they're all in the weeds doing great work. Yet we're the guys on stage talking. We're the guys that are the face.
So I'm putting my team on stage more. So we had 4 of us speak at Stephen Esk's event in Melbourne back in February, which was wonderful. So it's not just me on stage anymore. But and if they ever listen to this, I'm really sorry, guys, but not flying your business class to California anytime too soon. Well,
blame the pandemic. Don't worry.
You gotta earn your stripes, right? Do more local talks first, and then we can talk about all going over to TNC together. It is a continual balancing act. I am learning, and my GM is helping me learn to let go more and more of other areas of the business. Not having direct reports anymore has been huge. So she started about 1.5 years ago, and she oversees the management team, so that I'm sort of out to the side with a dotted line into her. Where I'm not very good is I still, exactly that. I know I'm going to be on stage. I want to know. I'm also super, super curious. So I've built my reputation and the business by knowing more about Google Ads than virtually anybody in the world and knowing what every single button does. And I am one of those people that goes in and presses every button and tries to break things. I figure that's how you learn. Yes, you read all of the literature and you read blogs and you go to Twitter and see what other people are saying, but ultimately you've got to get in there and do it. And I annoy the shit out of my team because I will go in and go, why are we doing this over here? And so I kind of play the role of the client now.
Yeah.
A really, really smart client that will go in. Sorry, that sounded really egotistical, but but somebody that knows about Google Ads that can go in and question us on why we are doing things and why aren't we doing this other thing, which can be really annoying, but it holds us all to a higher standard. We're trying to automate some of that. So we have a layer of automated audits on account, cover the basics. But then, I will be a bit annoying. And then when we get the new beta deck, which we've just got in from Google, I will go through that and go, oh, this is cool. I want to run. So I'm kind of like the R&D department. I want us to run an experiment using this new beta. I'll let you guys figure out which clients it is and what the parameters of that. And then they have the job of, unfortunately, going and talking to the client and saying, hey, there's this cool new thing and we think it's good, but we don't know yet. And we'd like to test it out. And we're going to take this much of your budget and we're going to run it. Expected business impact. We think this is going to happen. I suppose what they don't say is because Mike wants to see, but we need to know how that stuff. And we're very fortunate to have some clients that are incredibly generous with that and say, yeah, go for your life. If you think this is going to improve anything, test it. And so we can go to those accounts first and test there. And when we know something works, we roll that out.
I just know there's a lot of business owners that I speak to and listen on the podcast that when they do become the face and they take a lesser role, it often leads to some sort of imposter syndrome feeling of, how am I being the go-to guy or lady or woman?
There's definitely
when I'm
been
not
times
the one doing it.
Yeah, there's definitely been times on stage in the last 12, 18 months where I've gone, oh shit, that's a good question. But I'm very honest with that. I go, I don't know the answer. If my team were here, my team would be able to answer that. But I don't know the answer, but let me grab your email address and I'll find out and I'll come back to you. That's all I figure I can do. But I hate that feeling because I have never been on stage talking about theory and like, oh, I've got this cool idea for this. Everything that we talk about is based on fact and case study led and based on data. So for me, it's about feedback loops. It's how can I be the R&D department and design experiments? And this is the bit that really bugs the team and certainly my head of Google, because I'm like, I need to know what happened next and like closing that feedback loop. So we're in the middle of a massive move in our business. When the pandemic hit, I'm like, right, great. This is the opportunity to get rid of Podio, which we've been running on for 8 years. We're moving to ClickUp. We're right in the middle of that now. It's been a much bigger project than we thought it was going to be. And we knew it was going to be big. And we're building into that more of these feedback loops because ClickUp is much better for that than Podio was, so that I can know, okay, if we're going to do this, here's the experiment design. Like, here's how I put some guardrails. Here's how I designed the box. This is the stuff I want to know out the other side. And then how do we disseminate the knowledge and the wisdom from that and push that out to the whole team and then into all of the accounts that they run? I think that's the key thing for me, is how do you not just learn so that I can teach better inside of Agency Savvy and talk better on stages, but how do we use that knowledge in-house? And a lot of that knowledge does not come from me. It's how do one person on your team, they come up with this genius idea, which they do all the time. How do we take that idea, battle test it, and then roll it out through all of the other accounts? So that's just systems. And I was the E-Myth guy. I should be better at systems than I am. I know they're important, but I shouldn't be the one creating them because I've learned that the hard way. But it's those systems. It's recognizing, I think, exactly what you're saying, that this could become a problem if we let it go unchecked. How do we build systems and feedback loops in the business so that we still know? And one thing my GM and I were talking about last week is, do I have an account still? And do I keep my fingers in the pie? And I shouldn't have full reign over that. I shouldn't be doing all the comms with the client, because that would be unfair to that particular client. My team are way better than me at dealing with that, because if I'm in normal times, traveling or whatever, I'm just not going to give that the attention it deserves. But we're figuring that out as we go. How do I keep an eye on certain accounts? How do I work maybe more closely with a couple of senior account managers who I can bounce those ideas off? They can go test it. But yeah, feedback loops, I think, is the key thing. It's how do you learn from those experiments, and how does everybody learn? But it is an ongoing battle. I know people will look at us and go, oh, you know, one of the 2 biggest agencies in Australia, you must have this shit sorted. No, it's an ongoing thing and then you get that bit sorted, and then you realize the next problem, and then you get that sorted and you realize the next problem. I mean, like, oh, I've got a pulse. Yes, I must have a problem. You know,
solve the bottlenecks as they come across.
Yeah.
We'll end with this. Can you share some exciting things that are happening with AI and machine learning with Google? Things that will wow the listeners if they're not really like full on and fully entrenched in Google.
So what I'm going to choose to answer this question this way, where it's not so much the tools that Google.
Always good to have someone on the podcast, a guest on the podcast who sits there and says, "Great question," but I'm going to answer this question instead.
No. Answer this question instead. I'm going to, because I think what a lot of people will expect me to say there is, oh, you know, like smart displays crap, or smart shopping's okay, and smart bidding's pretty good, and the AI that Google have built into the system. What I'm finding fascinating at the moment is Google basically give away the entire tech stack that Google is built on. And it's in this thing called Google Cloud Platform, GCP. And in there, they've got tools like BigQuery and AutoML and all of this AI and all of the systems and Kubernetes and all of this great. And there's you log in and there's a list of about 80 of these things, and it's all virtually free. I mean, it's pennies on the dollar for the sort of volumes that we do, and we're a reasonable size agency. So what I'm loving at the moment is starting to push more and more data from Google out into BigQuery, where we can do some interesting things with it and model it, so that we can do things that you just can't do in the Google interface, and then putting another Google tool, Data Studio, over the top of all of that so that we can visualize that, because we are visual creatures. Looking at tables of numbers is not fun for anybody. Data Studio is a wonderful tool to help you then see the patterns and the trends in that data. So I'll give you one example. Google Display Network, we talked about very briefly before, and how there's a lot of idiot clicks and there's a lot of fraud, frankly, there. Google don't believe there's any fraud, by the way, on the Google Display Network, but some people reckon about 1 in 3 clicks. It could be that high, but there's a lot of fraud there. So we've got, over the years, we've built a huge list of something like 1.5 million websites and mobile apps out of about 3 million in total that Google say that there are there, with all the performance data. And then we feed that into, well, right now we feed it into, we started with spreadsheets, then we moved to BigQuery, and now I'm starting to play with this AutoML thing, which is Google's own build your own machine learning model, even if you don't know much about machine learning. So when I started learning about machine learning, bit of a tangent, sorry, like I went through all the books and I've coded and I learned a bit of Python and I refreshed my SQL skills, and I went and built like a little artificial neural network to go do this little kind of prediction thing. And I followed along in the books and I wrote this code, and I didn't really understand what the code meant. But anyway, I copied it all out just like I did when I was a kid. Now, you don't even need to do that. You fire up this AutoML thing, and if you can come up with a CSV file that's got a whole bunch of columns in, and then another file down there, a column down the end, that's the thing you want to predict. So here's a whole bunch of placement data. Here's a whole bunch of websites, you know, Quizlet.com and viralbuzz.com and blah, blah, blah.ru and MBA-info-6.info. And then a whole bunch of really good domains. And I'm not saying they're all crap, those ones I just said, but you know, they seem like they're pretty crappy domains. And we can feed all of that into this machine. We use some of our rules initially to say we think these ones are junk and these ones are not junk. Now here's some new domains, have at it, machine, and it will spit out a prediction basically of we think this is junk or this is not junk. So we're using the power of Google's machine learning and BigQuery and some Data Studio and all these amazing tools to enable us to be much, much smarter with the data that Google give us. So I think that's my bliss, right? Is playing with that cutting edge stuff. I know that AI is going to change virtually every industry out there. How that changes, we don't really know yet. But I think as business owners, we need to understand AI enough to be able to see the opportunities of what that brings, and to be able to understand enough of what it can do and what it can't do. You don't need to go play with AutoML and BigQuery. You can hire someone to do that. But you don't need to be a data scientist in order to be able to play with this stuff. You just need to know a little bit of code. That really excites me. I'm really, really curious to, over the next few years, and I unfortunately think we'll have a lot of insolvencies and a lot of businesses for sale at great prices next year. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses will go out of business next year as the knock-on effects of this economy keep happening. But I want to be able to know enough about AI and machine learning to be able to spot the opportunities and which industries I think we might be able to make a difference in, potentially buy businesses in there and start to bring the power of this stuff to bear on those industries. What data do they have in those businesses? How could we use that data? What could we predict if we clean this data up and use the right thing in order to make a prediction? AI is basically making predictions. It's way more complicated than that, but it's kind of making a prediction. In this case, predicting, is this thing junk or not? Or just simply sucking all of your data out of Google, dumping it into BigQuery, modeling it a little bit, and then in Data Studio, enabling us to see the data from our account in ways that you just can't do in Google Ads. I did a presentation for Perry Marshall a few months ago where I sort of showed this idea of synthesis. So I'll finish with this one, right? You think about a Google account, it's very hierarchical. You got your campaign, and then you go into an ad group and you can see the keywords and the ads in there. Then you go down and you see all the keywords in that ad group. And you can see all the search terms behind those keywords, or you can dive into a single keyword and see the search terms behind that. But now you want to go to the next ad group. You've got to go all the way back up to the next ad group and then down into keywords and into search queries. You want to go to the next one, you go all the way back up and across and down again. In BigQuery, with this sheet I've made, and I'll make it freely available to your guys if you want it, everything on one screen. So all your campaigns, ad groups, keywords, and search queries. And whatever I click on filters everything else. So if I click on a campaign, I see all the search queries for just that campaign. Or if I click on one ad group, I see all the search queries for that ad group. Next ad group, next ad group, next ad group, just by clicking on rows in the table. So everything is connected and everything's filtered, because I think as human beings, we are really, really good at synthesis, at thinking about all of these different things and how they're connected. And then I started playing with that, adding audience data in there and all the, I can't help myself, like adding all of this, because like, okay, what are the patterns here? Because AI is really, really good right now at doing little narrow tasks. It's getting incredible at a bunch of other stuff. But we as humans are really good at connecting the dots across a wide variety of things. And so I think that, the next level up from that will be sucking in all of your Facebook data or maybe your Pinterest and other stuff. And then, okay, what's the synthesis across this? Let's not have a conversation about attribution right now, but just being able to see all of that in one place. And yeah, that little tool I built is going to change because Google is starting to hide more of the search query data. So it becomes a little less useful, but it's still a really useful tool just to be able to just check an account, or, you log into an account that you're not very familiar with, just to be able to see what's going on. I find it really, really useful. So that's the fun stuff, is things like BigQuery. Data Studio is a wonderful tool. The team at Data Studio in Google are really, really good. They push out so many new changes and they're very transparent, unlike some of the bigger teams at Google. So yeah, I'm loving that stuff. That was a very long answer to a very short and very good question.
And I love Data Studio. We use it for all of our reports and with Supermetrics and a bunch of other things. Clearly, listening to you talk, you are a brilliant person and definitely know your space. So I don't think there's any imposter syndrome. Go back to my question 3 questions ago. I don't think that's an issue for you. For the listeners who sit there and say, look, I don't want to touch this. Let's give it to the best in the world. And clearly you are that person.
Thank you.
How can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Okay, so the done for you agency is websavvy.com.au because we're down here in Australia. So if you want us to do your Google ads for you, then hit us up there. If you happen to like the way I teach through this conversation, agencysavvy.com, that's where all of my courses are. We've also got some great guest content from the likes of Tom Breeze and Chris Mercer, Trevor Henselwood, who looks after Facebook in our agency, which is still a much smaller part of our agency. I think, you guys, and you mentioned Scott and Dee before, they mainly focus on Facebook. So there's loads of good options for Facebook. We are one of them, but there are lots and lots of others. But if you want a course on, I've got Google Ads, Data Studio, Google Analytics. Tom did the YouTube stuff. We've got some tag manager stuff in there, Google Shopping, which we haven't really talked about much. So that's all in Agency Savvy, plus a little bit on how to grow your agency. So clients, team, systems, and mindset. Big fan of the mindset piece there. That's all at agencysavvy.com. And if you just want to ask me a question, then probably the easiest way is either send me an email. I'll give you my personal email address. It's mike@websavvy.com.au, WEBSAVVY. Or just find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Mike Rhodes, and hit me up on Facebook and ask me a question. More than happy to help.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Before you go, mountain biking or helicopter flying?
I love them both for very different reasons. But I'd have to say, given I haven't been in a helicopter for a little while, mountain biking is the current escape, love, exercise, especially in this pandemic. I can only go 5Ks away from my house right now, but it's...
Well, look, I'm sure if you went mountain biking around the islands of Hawaii...
Heli biking.
You can have a different answer. Mike, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate you. Such I don't even know how to say it. Such a wealth of knowledge. And I appreciate you coming out here and sharing it with everyone. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, man.